Hey world, good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you happenstance into this Truth Bomb riff. My name is Patrick Lovell, and I'm experimenting with something new here. I've had the good fortune of reaching out and connecting with some very interesting people on X, of all things, because it's a cesspool. And when you find people of good merit and quality, it actually has an impact. And I'm deeply, desperately trying to connect with millions of people around the country with the information that I have. And I've decided that I got to reach out and meet people where they are. And I came across a gentleman the other day who I had the good fortune of seeing that he shared some of my stuff. And then I looked in just a slight more into his background, and I found out his name is Jeff Black Thomas. And
Yeah, Jeff Thomas Black.
did I say Jeff Black Thomas? Jeff
Yeah, you
Thomas
did.
Black. I am so sorry, Jeff Thomas Black. But
Not a problem.
and I discovered quickly that Jeff is a guy that is a force of nature, and somebody who has a lot of information and a lot of stuff that I can learn from. And Jeff, really, kind of in the spirit of just trying to connect with people around the country, I wanted to reach out to you and just record and just kind of find out where you are, who you are, what you are, and kind of what, really are the things that, I don't know, encompass, let's just say, your reality. And let's just start with who you are and where you are, man.
Wow. Yeah, well, that's quite a framing because today I think our reality is really smaller than it's been ever. And my reality is a very small reality. I write. I am a father of two adult children. Uh, I'm 56, was born in 1968 in Salem, Oregon.
Me too. We're right next to each other. I'm 55, but 1968 I was born.
All right, all right. Yeah, 1968 was quite a year. Uh, and it was, I think, I'm guessing that for you, the Vietnam War was a very seminal historical moment in your life as well, because our parents, our friends of our parents, our uncles and aunts, and you know, this was Vietnam War. Whether it was through the peace movement, whether it was the war itself, whether it was through the PTSD-ridden veterans and the social strife here back home, that was a very divisive time. And I think it's also the last time that we had a peace movement in the United States.
Well,
So
and
that's the
much more the year we were born in. I will comment on that. No, it's interesting though, because yeah, of course, like everybody of our generation, we were touched by it. But you know what really formulated a lot of my come from and my sort of evolution in that space was Jello Biafra of the Dead Kennedys.
Mhm.
And I was like in the whole punk rock mix in my teenage years. And so that really had a major framing of the Vietnam, but boy, did I learn so much more downstream, man.
And that was the punk rock movement that it really came out of that era. And a lot of my friends, I was not as much into the punk rock movement as as more the rock and roll, but they were very close cousins. I just happened to be listening to more of Jethro Tull than than the Dead Kennedys. But
Right
you know,
on.
it
I
really
listen
is
to Death Row Tool too.
very similar message. In fact, you can learn a lot from Jethro Tull's Aqualung. I know one thing that we share, Patrick, is a great love of music and the
Absolutely.
lyrics in there, because I've listened to enough of your work in the last few weeks. I've
Right
listened to
on.
Dawn, and I found it independent of meeting you. One of my readers sent me uh, a podcast that you did with William Bill Black, no relation, and the other person, Hubbard. What
Oh
was
no, Michael Hudson, I believe.
Michael Hudson? Okay, so Michael
Yes,
Hudson and Bill
yes.
Black and you did one, and so I watched that. I watched that whole thing. And oh man, these guys get it. Now you would expect that, of course, of Michael Hudson and Bill Black, because
They're the
that's
masters.
who those guys are. That's
Yeah,
what they do, what they did for their career.
right.
The challenge is the integration of any of this into our present lives. So you asked, who am I? Well, I mean, clearly nobody. I walk 2 hours a day. I'm the father of two adult children. I write things that very few people read, that speak truths from the life that I've lived. I have a background that includes a lot of work in large corporations and giant corporate offices and with people with a lot of wealth, even billionaires. And I got my education with a bachelor's degree in economics and then a master's in business administration from Duke University, which is a top flight business school with real top flight minds and
As they always
real
say, the
wealth and
Harvard,
power.
as they always say, the Harvard of the South, and I saw that on your bio, but I mean, again, like there's so much stupidity and vile drivel all throughout X, but yet you can find a diamond in the rough. And when I noticed that you had reached out and you saw some of my stuff, I was like, oh, I really hope I can connect with Jeff, because it's like, man, when I saw that, I was like, God, he's got a very interesting background on the world that kind of dovetails on a lot of stuff that I'm trying to convey. So, I mean,
Not very often, and this is very ironic. There's a great short story by Ursula Le Guin called Omelas. And Omelas, quite ironically, is the place I was born and grew up, spelled backwards, Salem, Oregon.
wow.
And Omelas is a very famous short story people can go read it online for themselves, but the bottom line of Omelas is that there is a realization within the story that as everyone comes of age, they learn that the good and the social of their society is based upon the slavery and torture of innocence. And
Wow.
so they have to choose whether to stay in Omelas or leave Omelas. It's a very profound story. I read it on the air during one of my podcasts one time and I cried,
Wow.
which is why I don't wear eyeliner like JD Vance, is because I am most certainly a crier.
Right on.
So very profound story. It's eerie and profound to me that story is also part of my life because I was born there, and it's a very true thing. That's a conservative state town. Not that I'm suggesting that liberal or conservative might be a virtuous end of polarity. It just is what it is. It is the state capital of the state of Oregon. It's a very conservative town, and it is where uh, a state based upon white supremacy and racism was founded. And this
I've been
state,
founded upon that because the white supremacy state happened long in advance of the evolution to the West Coast. But the bottom line, what you described with that Ocellus was what I thought.
Omelas,
What Salem
Omelas.
O'Mellis. Okay, I apologize for that, but it seemed like that's kind of the state of everywhere. I mean, it's a really peculiar. I mean, I feel like Dante's Inferno when you said that.
It is. There's the movie and TV show based upon the train that keeps going forever. The like nuclear powered train. Was what is that one called? Uh,
The first thing I'm thinking of is Springfield and The Simpsons, but I know what you're talking about. Anyway, please continue because it's
so
tough.
so it is a theme that has gone throughout humanity, but it's more than a theme. It's if you look at the work of Aaron Good,
Oh, sure.
who's another person I've watched recently
Political
do some very
scientist.
fine work with Ben Norton. Uh, Crackpot realism, which is the kind of moniker given to the philosophy of the American dollar hegemony based empire, is really based upon the same fundamentals as Omelis, that the mass of populace, you, me, all of us, there is no middle class. There is the top tier decision makers and then the rest of us. But that we are, dumb bovines in the slaughter chute. And they will do with us as they wish, which includes fraud, war, houselessness, poverty, genocide in any way, shape, or form they prefer. The challenge that we have is that we were brought up in a society of American exceptionalism. You and I grew up in a time when we said the Pledge of Allegiance in our schools, and where there was a very different type of society than we have today. There was less overt division, less information. People were more in the present moment. because they weren't tied to devices, lost, right? We socialized, we saw each other, we looked in our eyes. I don't remember growing
So
up and
true.
worrying about the politics of our neighbors. I don't remember worrying about whether our neighbors were conservative or voting for the right party or
Well, it's
anything.
kind
I
of like what
didn't
Tim
care.
Walz is saying right now with mind your own business, though, because that was definitely a generational thing. It was like that's the whole idea of liberty. And let me just touch upon that really quick, though, because see, on my journey, I had to reconceptualize and recontextualize my entirety of understanding of the paradigm that you just described because I'd always felt independent. I'd always felt maybe it's because I'm from an upper middle class. I had white privilege. I didn't realize at the time, and maybe back in the '80s, I would have kind of resented that because I've always been open to everyone and everything. I never judge anyone. I never, like I grew up. Music was such a huge component of our lives back then. I'd listen to David Bowie. Did I think anything strange of someone who might be trans? No, I just loved the art and what he was all about. I happen to love
Right.
punk rock. I love reggae. I love rock and roll. I love, so there was like a mix, but it took me my experience after the 2008 great financial crisis, where I used to think the law, like we had in, progress, that we had the civil rights, we had all of these elements in order to form a more perfect union that we came out of the 70s. Yeah, Vietnam was one side of it, and we could talk at length about that. But the other side was that we were struggling with the civil rights scenario, like Brown versus Board of Education, Selma, and all of these other types of scenarios. And you end up with, when we were born, literally LBJ, who I frequent often in my truth bombs, when I say, one of the paradoxes that I didn't discover until recently was something that he quoted quite often. And he said that if you can convince the lowest white male or white person on the lowest rung of the ladder that he's higher on than the highest black man on the ladder, then you can pick his pockets all day. And I thought to
Mhm.
myself, what a diabolical construct, But at the same time, again, here was my and I want you to address this because so I can understand some more orientation of hopefully where we can go with this kind of conversation. I had to literally rewire my brain because I thought the law, if you have the evidence and discovery, that the law takes its form and the facts and the evidence create an outcome. Little did I realize that no, the law isn't equal, even though I knew it. But I didn't realize we had probably, I'm just going to throw out 12 to 20 different variances of the law, depending on who you are in the matrix and how much resources you have.
Mhm.
Like, I think cherry picking the law is one of the biggest constructs that I had to overcome because once you see that reality, then you'll understand what the paradigm actually is.
Yes, and that selective aspect of law enforcement is the crux of what we see throughout the world, whether it's the monopoly that our police departments and sheriffs and officers that are called police officers in the United States have as qualified immunity. Like that's a monopoly on violence. The federal government has a monopoly on currency printing, right? And then
Wow.
you've got other monopolies where you've got the techno feudalists have a monopoly on cloud capital. And so
Absolutely.
what you have is uh, an illusion of freedom that we were sold in the 70s, but that has been realized as more and greater tyranny with the addition of technology. And now what we have is what I would call mass sewer surveillance. We're the sewer and everything is being surveilled.
Wow, you just blew my mind
Mm.
because what you've just identified is really my construct of where I am currently and what I wanted to get to a little bit later in the dialogue. But I just want to introduce this one thing because of what you just mentioned. I've learned a little bit about qualitative immunity the last few days because I'm involved with another project that
Right,
involves.
qualified immunity.
I'd
It's the
say,
right. It is the uh, right of a police officer based only upon their thinking. If they are on their job based only upon their thinking, they have the ability to believe that you are a criminal, believe that you are in a criminal act, and believe that, and they have the right based upon only their thoughts in the moment of being a police officer they have the right to use up to and including lethal force to neutralize you as a threat in their thoughts.
Well,
Now, if
it's a
that
lot.
doesn't terrify you, because police are known to be some of the worst, most corrupt, most afraid thinkers on planet Earth, that should terrorize you. That should terrify you. Nobody is safe. Your child isn't safe. Your grandma isn't safe. Nobody is safe against qualified immunity. Now, who is this gang that wields qualified immunity? Well, this is the gang that protects the oligarch's power,
Wait a second.
right? This is
Before
the
you go
same
there,
gang.
before you go there, let me
Yeah,
ask you
yeah.
a question though, because you just okay. So I'm a filmmaker, I'm a producer, and I really was impressed that you said you saw some of the content, and somebody who follows you on or shares information with you on X had suggested that to you, and that you saw some of it. And I want to circle back to that. But so look, I think in cinematic terms, roughly, right? And that's what I do as a living. I'm a producer, and I made this work called The Con, and that was why I had to reconfigure my brain. But going to the qualified why do I keep screwing it up? Is it qualified immunity? Did you say?
Qualified immunity.
Yeah, so I got it right. Qualified immunity. One of the most terrifying stories I've ever seen in my life was Training Day. Denzel Washington back
Okay.
in the late '90s, maybe early 2000s,
Yeah.
wanted this guy, and I know it's based on a true story, and he's going to be like King Kong, but just the authority, like I hate the idea of death squads, right? I hate the idea that you can have some sort of corrupt scenario where those with the guns can. I mean, my whole formula is liberty and justice for all, of course,
Right.
predicated on separation of powers, predicated on Bill of Rights, predicated on a constitution, because the revolution to the Civil War, our entire evolution is predicated on what we're talking about. But yet the reality, because this is what I had to reconfigure in my mind, and you just touched two of the premier principles of what it is that I'm striving to try to envelop and connect with people around the country about, are the first two marquee elements of what I call the Clean New Deal, but predicated on qualitative immunity. And also, you had mentioned, I, I'm jumping ahead slightly, but the finance, the backdoor of how markets work, because you had mentioned what I constantly go to. If you don't have the integrity of the law, you have something quite different. You don't have a democracy. You have something that could be what we're talking about, which is what I've had to really spend the last 15 years of my life truly grappling with, which is no, it's a facade. There are those in power who absolutely control outcomes and mechanisms that could, I think, in your world, that basically, and I always say, lead the pigs and the chattel to slaughter. But there was something else that I wanted to just briefly touch upon, because it's part of the four pieces of what I find so incredibly important. Because qualitative immunity is like presidential immunity, what we just saw the Supreme Court rule.
Qualified immunity. Yeah. It is truly a terrifying power, because when you look at the training, the knowledge, the qualifications to become a police officer and carry a gun in this United States, you are essentially looking at every single one of those people who are joining a criminal gang, a brotherhood, which has a ironclad code of silence, and you are conveying to every single one of those individuals the ability to murder at will for any or no reason whatsoever. And that is why throughout this United States, in liberal and conservative jurisdictions, in blue and red states, all over the place, cops are known for heinous acts of torture and crimes and theft and everything else. Now, the challenge that we always have when we criticize a system is that slogans don't work, right? Defund the police isn't a solution. That's one tactic, but what people want to know is then what does community safety look like? And so, as with your other challenges, the mental leap that we have to make to being awake in this present moment, Patrick, is what's the difference between community safety and an armed murderous police force with qualified immunity? I would argue there's a huge difference between those two things. And what any American or human of this planet wants is safety in this present moment with their family. What they don't want is a murderous gang of unaccountable terrorists roaming the streets. So if we start at those things, it's a whole lot different than trying to assail the criminal empire, which is the American policing and the American police unions and that criminal cabal, because the police unions are literally in the pockets and in the faces of everyone from your local mayor to your local uh, county administrator, everybody, all of these local departments, the jails, all of the processing, all of the city offices interact with the cops. So when you've got a criminal gang with qualified immunity to kill people, protecting city empires, which we all know are horribly dysfunctional at this point, right? One of the things I did when I was an activist was deal with a Portland City Hall in which a famous mayor, with complicity of city staff and city security, raped a 13-year-old girl repeatedly over a period of years. So the nasty things that can go on with the protection of the system are unlimited. And who are they not prosecuting? They're not prosecuting the people in power. They
Okay, hold on a
are
second.
prosecuting the other people.
Selective prosecution, which you touched upon, and now you're talking
Right.
about qualitative immunity, because now you're speaking my language in a way that I didn't anticipate with this call, which is mind blowing to me. Because we just randomly met in social media. Here
Mhm.
you are speaking in ways that feel very professional, quite frankly, very thought out, very, I mean, there's some knowledge here that's very intrinsic, because I know my subject inside and out, but you're touchstoning on the things that I'm trying to convey to the masses, which you've just in a very short period of time. Hold on, let me just get this out,
Yeah, yeah.
because this is so intriguing to me from the standpoint that, um, look, first of all, I just want to, I experienced in real time. In fact, it was a couple of months ago that I remember that the blue wall of the Manhattan or New York police turned their back on the mayor Eric Adams, as I recall,
That's
during
right.
the press conference. That's the first thing I want to touch upon. But when I was a part of the Occupy Wall Street movement, when I made my first documentary, Forward 13, I wound up in Zuccotti Park the day that the NYTD PD blew it down, and I was hearing these rumors that Goldman Sachs had paid for, I mean, like a huge upswell in their pension. They had provided them private clubs, like almost backdoor, like Gilded Gates sort of thing for their own personal security. And I was thinking to myself, wait a second, these are the stories that I would hear of the death squads in Mexico with the cartels, or maybe South
Mhm.
America as I was growing up, right? And I'm like, wait a second, I'm looking at that in real time in the United States. Now, my journey goes from the collapse of 2008 to now. But to your point, though, because this is what I'm trying to get to with the Clean New Deal, especially that, you talk about qualified immunity, but then I brought up, of course, Federal Reserve Act 13.3 and the way our financial system operates. And I'll bring it back full circle to that because we haven't had a chance to discuss that. But, I wanted to ask you the question about downstream of this, the presidential immunity, which has the same sort of invocation as what we're talking about with qualitative immunity, but then the electoral college. Can you make an assessment based on what I just laid out of those power structures within our system that turn everything on its head by way of our perception that we're a democracy of by and for the people, where the rule of law is supreme and equal? Not to mention financial markets, but you get my
But
drift.
I think that's where some of this, the historic work that I mentioned earlier, Ben Norton talking to Aaron Good, and some other folks. That's where that comes into the work that you did with uh, with Bill Black as well. This system was set up as a power protection scheme for oligarchs and wealthy people. It has always been so. And what we have been sold as capitalism is no more capitalism than the Soviet Union was pure communism, than uh, Venezuela Venezuela is pure socialism. These are just labels that really have lost all meaning because of the intricacies of what's going on. And then the other fundamental is that, look, we've just been flat lied to about what this system is. I studied economics in undergraduate study, and what we were described to as the markets, what we were described as the market system of the United States, and the checks and balances and the rule of law and all of those different things that figure into economics and our money supply, those things were lies, right? Those, they told us a happy story akin to Santa Claus when Christmas is a commercial enterprise. There is no Santa Claus involved. The United States is a commercial enterprise of oligarchs. There is none of your freedom involved.
I'm
It's a
also
very good.
reminded. I'm also reminded of religion when we think of the priesthood and protection of predation.
That's
That
right.
we
That's
saw through
it's
spotlight.
the Well, look, the same power protection scheme goes for religion as well, and religions are also in on this empire power protection and money laundering scheme. There's certainly a
Yes,
reason
yes.
that criminal empires of this world are run by people who claim religion on the headline of their bio, whatever that religion may be. It's a great cover for doing evil.
If you can convince the lowest rung white man on the bottom of the ladder that he's higher on the higher rung black man through this whole paradigm,
Well, okay, so
you
let's
can steal from
mention
them.
that. But I would say that today, what we're using for a scapegoat is what we call immigration. Now, human migration has been going on since the time when humans arrived,
Evolved. Yeah.
and so our I wrote a piece years ago called "Borders: The Tools of Evil Men," and that's what borders are. Borders are for arbitrage and taxation and ruling and property lordship and a bunch of military bullshit that doesn't do anything for us. Never
Right.
does anything for them. Now, locking people out based upon a border, what does that make you? Now, if we say, well, yes, but all of these bad things are happening because immigrants are coming and the government is giving them things. Well, that may be true, but nobody has ever given the masses of the United States, the populace, the proletariat, whatever you want to call us, more because they gave somebody else less. If the immigrants are coming today, yes, they're starving us out, they're breaking our economy, all of these things, but that's not people immigrating that's doing that. Those are the people in power that are making those decisions based upon crackpot realism, and
It
crackpot
manifests
realism.
from corruption and also climate problems a lot of the time.
Yeah,
But in our hemisphere,
it's all part of the same, it's all part
yes,
of the same deal in
yeah,
which look, we were told regardless of religion, we were told if you were going to be a moral and ethical business person or a moral or ethical adult in the United States, that ends didn't justify means. That was a real basic things that we were taught, that like, just because I saw you had a sweet bike, I couldn't just go beat you up and take your bike because I like sweet bikes too, right? But we happen to live in a country where the people who like sweet bikes just beat the shit out of us and took all our bikes. That's just what it is, man. The USA that we were sold growing up, what we were sold as a legitimate economic system, a legitimate mortgage banking system, a legitimate Fed, a legitimate world uh, economic forum, all of these things are schemes of oligarchs to genocide mass quantities of us.
well, I think that is undeniable considering the world that we see in our face every single day. But let me back up to the institutional analysis here, right? Because, see, anybody who has an education understands that systems can work functioning properly, especially if you've ever flown on an airplane or been on a ship that made it to its destination. There are systems that have to be integral with integrity such that all of the components work in synchronicity. Go ahead.
systems work as they're designed to work. A system designed for
Yes.
fraud will work. An airplane designed to fly will fly. An airplane designed to crash will crash.
Yes. And that's how I had to contextualize my entirety of understanding because
We
it
are an airplane designed to crash, and we're crashing right now. It's happening.
okay, so well, again and again and again, but maybe this one's the worst of all time. I keep thinking it could be the worst.
The worst of our lifetime.
Then it keeps getting worse and worse. But let me hit the rewind real quick, okay? You and I are the same age. You can remember this sort of continuity over the course of the last 13 years. So understand where I came from, right? I'm an independent producer. I do a lot of stuff in music. I do stuff in entertainment. I do stuff in like, action sports. I live like this beautiful life, right? And by the way, I'd happened to get hired where I was a senior producer on a television show giving away houses all over the country. And that blew up in 2007. And I remember being on set when the executive producer who was flying around in a G5, who was funding the show, almost came to blows with my boss. And I was trying to suss out what was going on, but nothing made sense. But meanwhile, what was unraveling would ultimately take me like a tsunami or an avalanche and basically destroy my life. It would lead to me being in the 2008 great financial crisis, of which I had to start pulling threads. And because I'm a producer, fortunately, I was able to put the opportunity together to go out and try to ask questions. And that led to about a 13-year journey through my prologue, which was my first documentary film. But it led to my series, The Con. But in the series, The Con, I was able to work with the top guys at the FBI, the DOJ, the SEC, and guys that actually are a part of this institutional, shall we say, it is the legal apparatus responsible for making sure that what happened to me didn't happen. And because I was able to manifest being able to go put a camera on the faces of the people that were in the trenches and on the front lines at the highest levels, the lowest levels, and everything in between, what I was able to was to get the truth, right? I was literally able, and I would recommend to everybody, please, 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 we made our series free because all the American people buy our lies, which gives you the blueprint of what Jeff and I are talking about. Because once you have the facts, you're no longer thinking in terms of conspiracy theory. You're no longer thinking in terms of hyperbole. You're not thinking of theory at all. What you're dealing with is what the entire system of discovery and evidence-based legal code of conduct that leads you to indictments and then ultimately convictions in front of the grand jury, which is the way our system's supposed to exist. But it doesn't because of what you said. Because what I discovered was the power players that were politically put in the positions of the ultimate decision makers for these institutions didn't want to use the law to prosecute. You talked about selective prosecution before. What they chose to do was whitewash the whole thing. And then they had on top of it, and this was my other naivete, Jeff, that I could never in a million years when I hit the rewind going back, but now it's just kind of a joke and a facade that I ever fell for it. The media, and I hate to give Trump any sort of any sort of credibility for his statement that we have fake media, but the media all played ball, which is why we had to go make the con to begin with, which was ultimately the discovery for the trial that the Department of Justice and the FBI and the SEC failed to do on behalf of the American people. So that's my starting point. But to your point, based on all of this brilliant technocratic sort of language and jingoism that I've heard you explain that also includes psychology, and I know you could go a lot further into that, I can tell. But the bottom line for me, and it's not the bottom line because it continues to go on and on, like David Byrne used to say, same as it ever was. It's just a new version of the same stories. The new boss, same as the old boss. But what we got to come to grips with, Jeff, and I got to ask you this question because this is how I'm trying to connect with people across their experience and where they're from, is that from where I'm sitting, and thankfully you and I are the same age, so we realize what's at stake here. It's almost kind of passe. It's a pasha to say that we're fighting for democracy right now between the election of Trump and Ms. Harris. Democracy was dead a long time ago. I'm not sure if we actually ever had it. Go ahead. I want to give you some time to talk, and then I'll maybe pose another question after you run with it. Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the things linking that power structure you're talking to, you're just speaking to, is the criminal vulnerability of the people at the top and despite their criminal vulnerability, there's a reason they're not prosecuted, right? So this individual named Neil Goldschmidt was the mayor of the city of Portland. Then he was the governor of the state of Oregon. Then he was the secretary of transportation under Jimmy Carter. That's a very powerful man. Now, he had a criminal vulnerability in that everybody knew that he had an open relationship with the 13-year-old daughter of one of his single mom employees in his office. So that's a criminal vulnerability that took him from the city of Portland, City Hall, all the way to the White House, right? What was Epstein about? Epstein was
Exactly.
not
That's what
about
comes to
just
mind.
the salacious acts. It was about criminal vulnerability. It's about
Absolutely.
all the powerful people that did awful criminal things and are not going to be prosecuted ever because they play ball. That's what we're caught in. And that's why when I took direct action to deal with a man who, with the photograph of a man being honored who had been taken down from the state capitol. His governor's portrait was taken down. He was shamed. He left the country and went and lived in France. He just passed away this year, Neil Goldschmidt, at the age of 83. But not one sitting politician or anyone else spoke up for me, while all the public, even the media, like there was nobody that was on the side of the honoring of this individual within Portland City Hall, but uh, that did not blight the fact that every city attorney, every politician, every city councilor, everybody would defend and stay silent the city's behavior in propping up the man who publicly raped a 13-year-old girl. And this is just a microcosm. This is where people
Yes.
get delusional about parties, right? Where, well, the Republicans are bad guys because they're raping children, or the Democrats are the bad guys because they're raping children. No, everybody who raises up to the top in this system is highly compromised. They've
Yes.
done awful things. They've done
Yes.
them,
That's how
and
you
people
fall
have
upward.
secrets about these people.
Yes.
And this is the way, this is not just the way a city government happens, but it does happen this way. This is the way Epstein was dealing with multiple US presidents, with techno
Don't
feudalists from
forget
around
billionaires.
the globe.
Yes. Okay,
Nobody
can you
even
hit pause?
knows.
Can you hit pause for just one second? Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I've got to chime in here because you've just
yeah.
blown my mind with that analogy. Because again, that was what launched my entire journey and my recontextualization of my mind, right? Because I thought the law was equal when you
It,
have discover and you have credibility. But what I learned was, and I knew this a long time ago. Let me just touch upon a couple of things that we can all relate to, right? So what did I just see passing around on X this past week, right? We see these pictures of Donald Trump with Jeffrey Epstein, and then we find out that Donald Trump is flying around. He's so audacious. He's flying around on Epstein's plane. That's what he's flying to on campaign stops. He bought Epstein's plane or is leasing it. And I mean, my God, are you kidding me? Not to mention what happened to Epstein during Trump's
he got a
administration.
good deal, man.
Well, he
you
killed him
can't
in prison,
begrudge a
I
guy a good
suppose.
fucking deal.
Look at Bill Barr and everything that took place and who Bill Barr was, the AG during Trump, who goes back to Contragate. Okay, but
Yes.
let me just say this, please, because I got to get this out of my mouth, because this is the reason I wanted to reach out to somebody like yourself, because this is what leads to the case that I'm trying to make to the American people. So first and foremost, again, we talked about priests, for example, that have gotten away with literally centuries of predation, and it didn't get blown out until this film based
And
on a
not just the individuals, the institutions themselves.
exactly. And I learned a long time ago, and in fact, it was the making of my first film. And the way I had to paraphrase it was that, there's two columns of our soul. You got character, integrity, decency, honesty, dignity versus hypocrisy, duplicity, and complicity. And people skew one way or the other depending on influence. And I learned a long time ago, because I wasn't a frat. And I realized that, and this has became the Trump manifesto, which is you lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate, especially the higher the rungs you go. But you just manifested the most important thing that was on the front page of the New York Times yesterday, which ties this all together to where Trump is, and quite frankly, the entirety of this election cycle. But it's not just the cycle, it's the whole system that we're talking about. Because yesterday on the front page of the New York Times, it was revealed out of the blue that there's this massive corruption scandal in Los Angeles based on real estate because these Chinese billionaires are laundering billions of dollars into Los Angeles real estate and San Francisco, where these city council guys who came from the barrios, who were self-made, who were the American dream, wind up getting roofied by the same matrix that we're talking about, where they had evidence, they had the story that these guys got nailed for like being involved with prostitution and drugs and all the rest of this salacious type stuff that goes back to Epstein and everything else. Because humans are weak, apparently, when they get too much, they can't hold back, and so they partake of this stuff. But that's how they get leveraged in this area, where the rich can basically utilize those that they put in power to basically do what they do, to do what then ultimately what they're revealing is they go and they basically, through eminent domain, blow up all of these poorer communities. And then the last thing that the New York Times identified was, well, wait a second, I wonder if there's a correlation between homelessness. I wonder if there's a correlation between the skyrocketing price of real estate, of which, of course, Kamala Harris said last night in an interview with Donna Bash, oh, we're going to give $25,000 to new homeowners, which, because of what I know, is just going to further hyperinflate asset prices because of all the stuff we show you in the blueprint of the con. What say you, my friend?
All election promises are worthless. The only time that matters is right now, the present moment. It's really a question: who is in charge and who is making decisions? It's not the people that we know and see.
It's not we the people.
It's not us.
Because
that's
the
not
thing
the
I
people
said,
that
right?
got elected with our alleged votes.
Are we a government of by and for the people when you have qualitative immunity, when you have the electoral college, when you have presidential immunity, and you have Federal Reserve Act 13.3, which I'm going to have to go into in a minute because I'm going to have to jump in 15 minutes. But I pose that question to you because you're an expert in this, and throw in psychology, man. What the hell does psychology have to do with
so the question that what you'd have to ask yourself is, these people that are self-made and rise into politics, allegedly, first of all, nobody makes themselves into politics. They're purchased into politics. They go into politics. These are people. Robert Sapolsky, the great Stanford professor of psychology and many other things, would tell you these are already people that have personalities and have been formed to seek out this kind of power and wealth and status. And so when you've got a subset of people that are
created, and they see how they
created to exploit a system to the full extent of its ability, then you've got a system that's exploitable. This goes back to the mortgage banking and all of the things that you've done in your work. If those exploits are there, it's not a question of whether they will be used. It's a question of there is no question. The question is there any stopping the fraud? And this is the challenge.
The way it works in businesses that I discovered because I had the greatest tutelage that you could possibly have, because my mentor is literally the Michael Jordan of criminology, who is William K. Black of your namesake, but you said you weren't related. No, it seems like you've got the same sort of capacity, but this guy, he's in the trenches guy that put away 1,700 of the highest white collar executives during the S&L crisis. But they created, between him and it'll come back to me in a minute, but they created the notion of control fraud, but built upon and predicated on Gresham's dynamic. So George Akerlof.
Right, and control fraud meaning that CEOs can essentially run rampant with the power that they have because they define the accounting.
Yes, based on the number that everybody has to turn. Yes,
which is another. So what we're dealing with, it's hard for me to describe this because we're dealing with multiple layers of illusion. Profit is a layer of illusion, right? The market is a layer of illusion. CEOs are a layer of illusion. Our president, our political parties, those are layers of illusion. But they're layers of a system that works as scripted and as dictated by the people running it. It's not a market of forces in which we the people matter,
Okay, but
or
hold
we
on
the
a second.
people
But do
are
you hear that?
even taken into account, other than the fact that we are tools for
Yes,
their empires and wealth. And
yes.
we don't want to be tools for their empires and wealth, because look at history. Tools of empires and wealth go down very hard.
But you identify, yes, and that's what we're trying to prevent. That's what I'm trying to prevent. And I think we're like-minded individuals, but there's frustrations because we know the parameters ultimately of what you just identified. And this is what I'm so desperately trying to get those that are watching this and those that we have to be able to build a consensus with, that you can't hide from this. Listen, I know, and I'd like to get your, because I know just based on what I'm hearing from you, that you've given some thought to the empath, to the thought of the people that have been beat down, what triggers them and how they're going to react. I can just tell that based on our conversation, but let me just introduce this first. So look, the notion of we the people, right, is that you have to have a citizenry that can hold power to account. What did we hear back in the 1700s? And we've heard throughout history, right? Absolute power corrupts absolutely, first and foremost.
What you
Bastiat,
just said is the last thing the people in power want.
right, and Frederick Bastiat had learned back in the 1700s, and he happened to be a libertarian. And I always kind of laugh about that, but that when a group of men discover plunder in society, which we're calling control fraud based on modern executive compensation
Right.
now, but when a group of men discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. So there you get the trifecta of the power of which I'm trying to break through, because I went on this incredible journey to where this isn't hyperbole, this isn't theory, this isn't me giving you my opinion. What I was able to do was extract the evidence of the things that make what they are. Now, I come from a background where I understand geopolitics, I understand systems, I understand law. I do have a pretty good sense of economics and themes and psychology and all the rest of it. So I was able to manifest because nothing had made sense. You and I come out of the era where you might remember one of my favorite quotes in a movie was the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. But they were
Right.
pissing on my head telling me it was rain because they thought I was a new fool. I've never been a sucker for anybody. And most people I've ever hung out with weren't suckers for anybody. And we've always been people that are go getters and do shit. We don't hide from problems. We don't back down from conflict. We don't pretend that something is what someone says it is if they can't prove it. I've hung out with A-list surfers, mountain climbers, skiers. People don't pretend to be really good at those activities. They're either really good or they're not. So I know what reality is. And I'll tell you this one last piece before I turn it over to you. I remember coming up in Los Angeles when I was a producer and I started off in advertising. And I remember my boss used to tell me perception is reality. And I kept thinking to myself, if I punch you in the fucking face, that's reality. You know what I mean? But whatever. The bottom line is that this is what happens in the psychosis is that the system can control the complicity through the number that people are going to act counter to. I don't know. We all sat in the movie theaters where you're either on the side of the empire or the side of the resistance. And I always thought most people were on the side of the resistance. But as it turns out, most people are complicit with the empire. So let me just give you this and let you run with it because I wanted to go for about 10 more minutes and then I got go ahead.
People feel that there might be safety in the empire. I think is what the way they don't know an alternative to the safety of the empire, which is all they've been raised with. Think about, imagine that the world is. And I'm literally just thinking about this more as you're talking. Imagine that the world is like your 3 and 4 year old kids, uh, and that you have spent their entire, or 5 and 6 year old kids, and you've spent their entire toddlerhood and childhood telling them about Santa Claus. And on Christmas Day, you wake up and you tell them Santa Claus doesn't exist. This is a capitalist venture that is about making money for major corporations, and we're not going to celebrate Christmas. It was all a lie. Never mind. Let's go out and let's go out and take the dog for a walk. You're going to have some pretty fucking unhappy kids. So I'm gonna argue that American exceptionalism and the story of what U.S. capitalism is, what U.S. dollar hegemony means, what foreign wars and empire building and regime change means, is the story that we have been told as Americans is much more akin to Santa Claus. And the problem that I hit you with that I've seen in my own work is that this is that big of a shock of telling people that the Santa Claus of the U.S. U.S. empire does not exist in the way, shape, and form that has been presented to them. It's a ruthless, soulless commercial operation that doesn't and won't love you. Now, that is something I've called narcissistic empire abuse, because it's like other types of empire abuse. It leaves people confused. It leaves people in grief. It leaves people in constant cognitive dissonance. It divides people. It leaves people with a sense of manufactured scarcity, but fear and anxiety. And what I'm going to argue is that what you're running up against, what I'm running up against, what anybody who would be so fortunate as to hold the gold-plated truth in their hands would still run up against, is that telling an entire nation or an empire of people that the Santa Claus that they've grown up with, the joy of a presidential candidate, the magnificence of an orange oligarch, any of these things, these are fairy tales. These are not exceptional people. They're not good people. They're not smart people. They're not capable people. One of the things that I learned at Duke is that there were people that had much higher IQs than I did. In fact, I would put myself easily in the bottom third of IQs in my class. That did not make for the best strategists or the best human beings or the best people. In fact, I won every single major competition my class had. Now, I wasn't the smartest guy. Why did I win? Because I integrate things and I don't get necessarily lost in my own ego. Sometimes the smartest people know how smart they are and they think they're always right. They think because Robert Sapolsky said this so well, right? The talent to do a leveraged buyout and steal somebody's company, that is most certainly one kind of talent. Is that a talent that makes a person a better human being? No, no, it's not. That's just one kind of talent, like dunking a basketball or something. So the problem is, in this society, what we have elevated up to Santa Claus stardom is people who steal other people's company and people who steal other people's houses and people who steal other people's wealth, because that's how people get rich. They robbed it from us.
True, but based on a facade. Okay, but you're right about, okay, so look, I wouldn't challenge you on anything. In fact, I'm just kind of aghast at how incredibly enlightened and quite frankly, I feel like I'm dancing on your words as if I just heard poetry linger in the air. I mean, you've got an incredible skill, my I'm coming out of the blue with this, dude. I don't have any context.
If anybody would like to read some of the millions of words that I have online, just put in Jeff Thomas Black into. I've got essays on Medium and essays on Substack, and I've been writing on that sewer of Twitter X for a very long time. So I've got a very large body of work. I also have a documentary film that I've yet to publicly release that is on the subject of police murder. Go figure. It's called
I've
Moose.
got to dive into that too, because that's
Yeah,
part
I sent you the trailer on that. But again, one of the challenges that I have, just like you, I have so much empathy for all the work that you're doing. Is it seems like sometimes the more ironclad truth and facts that you have, the more you're suppressed, the more your work is hidden, the less likely people are to share your work. And that's one of the things, in sharing your work, sharing Aaron Goodwin's work, sharing Whitney Webb's work, Caitlin Johnstone. There are so many people in independent media doing great work, telling the truth. But all of this truth is swimming upstream against a river
understood. Understood.
of propaganda and humanity. And
But,
again, we're all in grief together. We're all
right.
in grief.
I
We have to
gotta ask
accept
you
it.
this question because this is why I reached
Yeah.
out, and unfortunately, I got to do it much quicker than I want to because I
Yeah,
want
no
to
worries.
for hours, and I hope that we can continue this dialogue and maybe make it a regular thing because there's so much more I want to explore. And I promise you, I'm going to read what you just laid down and also your trailer and so on and so forth. But I'm coming at this from a specific, position because again, look, in my life there are tangibilities, and I was an athlete. I know what it means to compete at the highest level, right? I know what it means to do things that are life threatening, but you have to have a specific skill to be able to navigate those challenges. And I know what it feels like to be able to lived through them. I knew all of that stuff long before I got into this world, right? I studied political
Mhm.
science, I worked in Hollywood and yada, yada, yada on a corporate front. So I understand, just kind of the methodologies of hierarchy and systems, which enabled me to understand kind of the things that we're talking about. But what people need to understand and what I have to get through to people, okay, in the one out of a million or one, whatever the percentage is, right? Because we know that so many people, whether they've been gaslit to death, where they have been beat so down that they can't really absorb or understand the nature that they do have power, particularly the power of critical mass, and they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to start and try to explore all of these incredible things that a lot of us have to do through college and experience over decades that get us to our philosophical construct and so forth. What I'm providing is a very, very detailed analysis that tells us exactly what our power is at this moment in 2024, given all of the other problems that we all know. If you understand that we're in a major crisis with our climate, with all of the elements of the police brutality or education or women's rights and all of the other things that are under assault, particularly if Trump wins. But the long of the short of what we have to do to build, in my opinion, I want to hear what you have to say about this because this is why I reached out to you. So, above all else, people, and I got to preface this question to you first before I go into it. Have you ever been in a situation where you've had financial problems, hardships?
Yeah, yes. I have been. I have lived in with poverty and houselessness for the last 10 plus years of my life.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay, so see,
I, yeah, in the corporate world, I did not lie, cheat, and steal, and that has apparently been held against me with great malice. I also did some public civil disobedience and things, which we don't know because there's no rationale why we are denied employment. But I've essentially been denied gainful employment and housing for over a decade now. Yeah.
well, let me tell you something. I can relate to that because all the people that I had interviewed for my work, the con, were the top brass and guys with MBAs and they, degrees and PhDs and so on and so forth. And they're unemployable because they told the truth, which is what I'm trying to get to because they told me the truth.
There is a fucking price to pay. If you want to know why a lot of people don't sell out, they don't want to be like us.
But see, that's what I'm saying is that what I'm offering and what I'm trying to get people to wrap their heads around is that I've already got the big bang of truth. What I'm trying to create are people that are nuclear reaction vectors to work around the Borg because the Borg has stymied everything through the algo. And what I'm giving you is what the DOJ, the FBI, the SEC, the OCC, and so on and so forth, all the regulators could not do on behalf of the American people because of the corruption we're talking about. And I got to jump to the chase because as we talk about qualified immunity, as we talk about the Supreme Court recent decision on presidential immunity, and of course the Electoral College. The point of all of that, guys, is you're not a democracy. You don't have a capitalistic structure because of what I'm going to go into Federal Reserve Act 13.3 briefly. And ultimately, the law is not equal. Everybody knows it, but the thing is, are you going to sit there and get roofied and allow that to happen or watch your colleagues and your friends get roofied and raped and thrown into the garbage? Or are you going to fight back? From where I come from, you fight back. That's just the nature of the way it works. And so, no matter if you've gotten beaten down and you don't know which direction to turn because you don't have all the answers, the fact is, I've got to convince you I've got the right answers that if millions of us came together with this information, the system is the emperor's new clothes, and I'll have to use a reference to my deadhead days on really bad acid because of this. And let me just finish with this because the way it's all working right now between Kamala Harris against Trump is the good girl prosecutor who's obviously a technocrat, millions of miles more capable than the idiot zombie apocalypse and MAGA Trump contagion, even though they all have huge problems because of the matrix we're talking about. But what the most important aspect of everything in our culture, it's not the most more important aspect of your life, it's what undergirds everything and why I premised the question of have you had a financial hardship? Because money, unless you're absolutely independent and you can live by yourself on the land that you can own without, which very few of us are, We have money in our construct. But what I'm asking you to understand, all of you to understand, is that money is supposedly not grown on trees. It's something of our labor, of our education, of our STEM, position in society based on what we were able to achieve. That's not what ultimately fuels what is our currency, which is literally fiat currency. And I'm not going to make an argument for gold standard or anything else like that. I'm just telling you that the Federal Reserve of the United States, which is the central bank of the United States, that was built in 1913 or created in 1913 through the Federal Reserve Act Charter, was supposed to create stability. And its mandate is very simple, as you know from economics, my friend Jeff. It's to create the three simple mandates: price stability based on 2% interest rates, but full employment. But it's not that since 2009. What it is to accommodate the absolute superstructure of assets and hyperinflation, particularly as it relates to stocks, which are owned by this class that you're talking about. But the way it has all been fueled, and you can understand all of the details of the blueprint in our work, The Con, at www.thecon.tv, which pieces together the largest racketeering enterprise in the history of the world, bar none, but that unfortunately never ended because of what I'm about to tell you guys. And it's this simple. They continue to fuel tens of trillions of dollars into the system that has absolute immunity and impunity. Because what happens is the financial system has been operating illegally, doing, like we talked about, qualified immunity, and it's not within the ramifications of any sort of market repercussions. Because ultimately, the idea of capitalism, and why you and I both said that we don't have capitalism, and I'm not sure exactly what your definition is, but in mine, in addition to it being productive private ownership of goods and commodities to market based on profit for individuals, what capitalism is money making money, but yet there's a risk reward element to it. And what I am revealing to you, America, is there is no risk to those that have complete control of the system. We've continued to give tens of trillions of dollars illegally behind the back door through the Federal Reserve because nobody understands how the system works, of which I've pieced it all together. That proves it's just this simple.
And it's how the system doesn't work, right? The system
Bingo.
doesn't work by great purpose and effort. And one of the things you're talking about that I'm very much a proponent of is there is hope. One of the unique aspects of techno-feudalism and the surveillance state and all of these technical solutions that are being used for tyranny is that as individual human beings in the present moment, we also have the ability to opt out of those things. So as their systems are absurd and illegal and
Destroying the world by poisoning it over and over.
just right, intentionally destroying the world with a crackpot realism. I'll use that term again. That if they don't do it, somebody else will, and this is just the way to run a good, solid empire. It's what serious people do. Well, we have to have that hope, and Whitney Webb talks about this. Caitlin Johnstone talks about this. Everybody, Daniel Schmachtenberger with the Consilience Project, new systems, new incentives, new ways of being awake, functioning humans that reject open fraud and open tyranny of oligarchs and billionaires. And, if Patrick can prove to you a million ways that everything is a fraud. But again, that's like proving that the cops are the biggest criminal gang on earth. We know that. What's the alternative to that?
That's what I got.
What's the alternative to police that offers community safety? What's the alternative to financial tyranny that we're experiencing and social tyranny?
Can I offer this real quick? Real quick? Okay. And again, we've got to continue this forward because it's up to another call. We barely scratched the surface, but I'm going to offer you these principles based on the way my go-to, and I come up with these rhymes and these jingles sometimes to make shortcuts, but this is a crusade to purge and bulldoze tyranny the misery of tyranny to unlock the renaissance of possibility. Okay, because in the end, I am somebody who thinks that anything is possible. I do believe that, but I also, because of that, understand the worst of all of us is possible as well, right? I understand the Holocaust, I understand genocide, I understand all of those things. So what I've developed is called the Clean New Deal. Okay, we've got to create a new Glass-Steagall, which separates commercial banking from investment banking, so that you can't gamble with other people's money if you're a too big to fail bank at a systemically important financial institution. That's one, and that comes from basically doing the congressional inquiry to blow up what these guys
And
are.
what did too big to fail actually mean? What too big to fail meant was that it was already your government's money. That's what too big to
Bingo.
fail really meant. Too big, that wasn't too big to fail. There was no failing because the failing would have been the United States, not the business people.
Absolutely, but who they put in positions of power based on what we're talking about, because again, the
Right.
people have given up that right to hold power to account, which is what the democracy is supposed to do. But we have not done it. We failed. The people failed. That's why I had to go. But the media failed, because I think people may have been a little bit more ambitious had they understood what was going on. But we got lied to, gaslit to, and then after a while, everybody goes crazy. But let me just get this out of my mouth. We got to end Citizens United. You got to end the back door of dark shadow money that enables all of this stuff to go on, because then we're just what? We're just another South American drug cartel with nukes. Okay, Banana Republic.
That's right. So what I say, the thing that doesn't work and won't work is facing men with guns in the streets.
Right.
There's no reason to do that. All we are is cannon fodder. What we can do
True.
is, and the pandemic showed us this. We learned a lot from the pandemic. We learned a lot about our politicians. We learned a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot about our system. And
True.
people don't want to take that learning and put it into effect. But
Right.
what we learned is that we can crush oligarchs, we can crush corporations, we can crush billionaires. What we need is a general strike that shuts this stuff down to the point where we break their cartel. We break their cartel because we stop participating in it by being their cannon fodder.
I've heard that before too, but you got to get the mass. I think the people, this is where I'm coming from, the tens of millions of people that have gotten crushed by the system that need to awaken together with the facts so that they can't be gaslit and we can't go in a million different directions. Because when you have Glass-Steagall, you get rid of the Ponzi scheme in the financial system. When you get rid of Citizens United, you get rid of legalized corruption. But you have to be able to demonstrate, and what I'm doing is that they literally got away with north of 71 trillion. There's 1,000 billion and trillion, my friends. 71 trillion to maybe 100,000 people, players in the financial system, of which a majority of that went to billionaires over the course of the last 14 years. It's free money, illegal to these guys that are destroying everybody and now creating like platforms of propaganda. And I refer to Elon Musk as O'Brien from Orwell's 1984. But see, once you understand what you can do with regenerating the system, that's the renaissance of possibility. Because people always go, "How are you going to pay for that?" How are you going to pay for that? We can
Yeah.
manufacture money out of fucking thin air. It's how are you going to hold the bad guys that are stealing it from the people
So
and
that's the manufactured scarcity and
yes,
scarcity thinking that they created for us with their criminal empire.
right,
It's not because there is a scarcity of resources or housing or land or whatever else. Of course, there are planetary limitations, but the scarcity is
absolutely,
caused by their hoarding and
absolutely.
by their unlimited greed and criminal enterprises. So
Wait,
the
wait, wait,
thing,
wait, before you go into that,
yeah,
I'm almost done because I'm going to give you that, and then I got to
yeah.
finish up on the last
Yeah.
thing. But thank you, because this is the whole reason I wanted to connect with you, Jeff. This is an amazing conversation, and thank you for your time, man. But so you know, what's the biggest apparatus that controls all this stuff? Well, the Supreme Court for one, but it's also the judiciary, of which the Supreme Court, we've got to add, the easy fix. It's not an easy fix, but you've got to have 11 justices given the corruption that we've got currently. But at the same time, you've got to be able to, hold these guys to account. And I think it's more than an ethics violation. I mean, these guys have got to be in prison. The fact that Clarence Thomas can take, backdoor channels from the guys like Harlan Crow and everything that represents, and Leonard Leo and the Justice Alito and all of these guys. I mean, are you kidding me? That they literally would not allow the Constitution, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, Section 3, which basically deals directly after the Civil War with Confederate officers that tried to overthrow the government. My God, it doesn't get much more black and white. And the Supreme Court justice was like, no, hey, you know what? We're going to just basically erase American history with a stroke of a pen because we're getting paid billions of dollars or, whatever it is to, for our fanciful vacations and etc. This is just no more judicial corruption. And for the women out there with Dodd and Roe and all the rest of it, I mean, my God, ladies, we're talking about your ability to live free and everything that happens with your own bodily autonomy. That's tied to this. And then the final piece of the equation for me, going back to this whole deal of qualified immunity and the rest of it with the electoral college, is that no more, man. You've got to get rid of the electoral college, in my opinion, as soon as possible. And it's not going to happen right away, but we got to build towards that because as it stands right now, for example, Wyoming has a disproportionate amount of billionaires in a very small place like Jackson Hole because of all of the different methodologies of, tax havens and everything else that have all attracted them there. But I mean, they've got as much legislative power as the state of California with 50 million people. This is absolutely insane. This is how you end up with this perversion, which is what we're talking about, that roofies the American public, lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate to keep the power at wit's end, which is, of course, tyranny. The American Revolution, for better or for worse, was to break the grip of tyranny. So that's my position, my friend. And I've got the goods. This isn't hyperbole. The Clean New Deal, in my opinion, how does that resonate with you, Jeff?
So it makes sense. Where I struggle is that depending upon any part of this empire to rise up and save us from the rest of it is a very difficult mental leap to take,
Even though
because
it's all spelled out?
it is so very highly captured. I don't know that I don't believe there's any part of the empire that could that will be able to stand over this whatever type of thing that is going to happen to us next. I don't think that that's also the most important aspect. Again, I think one thing people have to ask themselves, because everything that you're talking about comes into acceptance, which is part of being awake, part of awakening and letting go of a lot of the pain, part of a lot of letting go of judgment and bad thinking, including judgment and bad thinking about oneself. Right, because we're all, when we economically fail, which everybody around here is an economic failure. Raise your hand and say hallelujah. When we economically fail, we want to blame ourselves. And so that is so driven into us as a human being that if we're not economically successful in the United States, that we're the problem. I think we have multiple steps to recovery, Patrick. I think that we're all recovering from wage slave narcissistic empire abuse, which has devalued us as human beings. And now you see corporations and governments and oligarchs and techno-feudalists taking their money and placing it everywhere but in human capital. And here's one thing we can't do, right? You can't crack open my arm and money doesn't fall out. I don't have any way here, this relatively healthy 56-year-old human body, to produce money unless somebody who has it is willing to give me the opportunity to get it from them. That is a really fun.
Which makes you different from the Federal Reserve and the oligarchs that are controlling this system at the behest.
Right, because they print their own money,
right,
by creating debt.
Based on us, though, the full faith.
And then they give you the debt. Right. You get the debt. They created the money from it and they live happily ever after.
Right.
So we have so many layers of acceptance. So I guess where I'm coming to from this, to sum up our talk for today, it's been so great getting to know you and your work. And it's so encouraging to see, to see people that want to stand not upon some left or right paradigm or religious morality or anything else, but standing upon humanity. Because at the core of everything that I do is civil rights. I'm not here to judge people or pick out winners or say who's good or who's bad. I'm looking at equity and the opportunity to survive and thrive as a present moment human being. And those are the things that have been taken away from us. And even though, Patrick, I am have lived in absolutely crushing poverty for a very long time now, I've been able to create a life for myself because I live in the present moment and I really focus on being and being present and enjoying nature and being healthy and doing all the things that I can do to contribute to the world and myself that are not economic. Now, am I lonely? Am I sad? Do I have tons of grief? Do I have tons of loss for the things that I used to do and the social life that I used to have and all of those different things? I absolutely do. And I share that with so many of my friends. But at the same time, one of the things we can do when we talk about, are you a fighter, right? Is get out and be healthy every day, eat good food, breathe fresh air, think your own thoughts, unplug from these slave tools that they give us that are constantly pumping ideas in your head that are nothing but fallacies. Because one of the things I always go back to psychology, right, is that we're primates. We're very basic individuals, and what we really want is food, security, housing, family, community. What part of taking over Moscow did I just mention? Taking over Moscow doesn't, or ruling Venezuela or getting oil from the Arctic. None of those things were on the list of the things that I need in my daily life. And I think we have to wake up as human beings to what it is that we really need and we want, and what these people in power are attempting to sell us. Because I don't think the numbers add up, right? We have to ask, like, why are these people? These are human beings too? Does Sam Altman and the psychopaths, Peter Thiel, do these people really just want the world to end with their lifetimes? Yeah, I think they'd be fine with it. I don't think they care. But that's not who we are, right? Some of us are parents. I'm a parent. We have families. We believe that human life and peace and humanity have values. We believe in empathy. We believe if a 90-year-old woman gets fraudulently kicked out of her house to the point where she commits suicide, we believe that's a great human tragedy, right? So all of those things are the present moment realities of our life that are propagandized away from us, Patrick. And I think, looking at this beautiful scenery behind your head, those gorgeous trees and the sunshine and the place where you are, it takes no money to enjoy that, right? There's no medium of exchange that's required for you to turn around and look at the trees. And I'm going to argue that this medium of exchange, many people may have heard, money is the root of all evil. Well, in many ways that could be true, because a lot of the evil that we're seeing in this world is all about hoarding a medium of exchange. And even if that medium of exchange is called a precious metal like gold or silver or diamonds or rubies or whatever, you can't eat it and you can't take it with you to heaven. So that medium of exchange is only going to get you so far, right? So I think we've John Kabat-Zinn is one of my favorite authors, and he was one of the people that kept me alive through poverty. And he quoted a saying to the effect of, "If your mind is not distracted by unimportant things, today is the greatest day of your life."
Man, I love it, and I'm better. I feel like today I've been blessed by your insight and awareness in a way that I didn't anticipate. You know, I'll close it out like with this for me though. Again, the world spends, I don't know, 25,000 miles an hour. We've all got about the same amount of time to do what we do, whatever length of time that we have in this precious life that we have in this incredible void of space that's infinite in every single direction. And even though I believe that there's life out there, and it'd be kind of silly for it not to be, considering the numbers of planets that habitate this galaxy, let alone, excuse me, yeah, the galaxy, let alone the cosmos. At the same time, we still don't have absolute evidence of that. And so I live every day, and I have my whole life, to one, try to take as much out of it in terms of perspective, awareness, and value, and then use that to better myself and then all those that are around me. But I had my life stolen. I had my life destroyed. My
Mhm.
life destroyed by an entity that I know who did what, when, and how. I understand the law. I understand also retribution, a lot of other things that are outside of that, but I believe in the law, and I believe that the law is flawed, but I also know how easy it is to actually, when you're motivated and you have the critical mass and you have the critical will to be able to go do the discovery, and you can put the indictment based on the evidence and the facts together, that when you put that in front of the grand jury of the American people, the idea is that it's you're guilty or you're not guilty. And a lot of times they get it wrong because of all of the fallibility of human beings. But what I am giving the American people is the actual construction of how this system operates illegally above the law to pervert all that we are. I am the guy that if a woman walks into a party where the guys are going to roofie her and gang rape her, I don't let it happen.
Right.
If someone is in, jeopardy of being jumped by a gang, I tend to help them under those circumstances. And if I happen to see a bunch of weasel rich guys with Ivy League degrees that put themselves above, I know that they can be taken down. Now, whether or not that's through violence or that's by using the system that we have is dependent on whether millions of us come together to rise above the ocean of madness and lies to elevate the truth. And the only thing I can ask of you people, understanding the nature of your life, where you are at any fixed moment in this incredible galaxy, is to understand that, yes, this is the big bang of truth in nature, through cosmology, through the great radiation, through the theory of relativity, through all of those elements that design our universe. There is light and there is literally dark matter, and there's always a tension between them. I'm asking everybody to understand that truth, and this is the whole purpose of liberty and justice for all, and the Statue of Liberty with the light of justice and truth, is that the only way that manifests is if we make it real. That's how it works. We don't click our heels three times together and hope that somebody who could be corrupted is going to look out for our own best interest. That's why we were designed to where the buck stops with the citizen, but you have to act like a citizen, not chattel. So, am I right? Am I wrong? I think I could hopefully turn, I don't need to turn 300 million people. I don't need to turn 150 million people. If I turn 10 million people, we are a force to be reckoned with. And that's what we have to do. But again, you have to understand, my friends, that we did the work that the Department of Justice, the SEC, the FBI, the GOJ, the AGs around the country, and all of these mechanisms that are institutions that Jeff had qualified earlier, through all of the problems of revolving door and the psychology and the weakness of complicity, and they failed us. They absolutely failed us, and they failed us. They have tens of thousands of employees. They have billions of dollars, and that's not to mention media, who's been lying to us the whole time. If you're like me and you got tired of them pissing on your head, telling you it's rain because they thought you were some kind of new fool, and you're the type of person that's going to rise to the moment to defeat evil, then I'm asking you to join me on this crusade to purge corruption. And that's what I'm doing. So I hope it doesn't sound too preachy, but that's what I'm doing.
I think you're right on, and one of the biggest aspects of this is there is a keystone, and Santa is a reasonable analogy. Once that illusion is broken, and that's what Patrick is talking about here, is breaking the illusion of legitimacy that this system holds. Once that illusion is broken, you don't have to be like Patrick and I and remember all the details, because we're geeks that study this crap 24 hours a day, right? This has been my life for so long. I could talk about this stuff for the next 7 weeks straight without stopping, right?
Right.
But that's not the point. That's not what people need to take from this. What people need to take from this is to understand, once you know the illusion, once you know that the lady didn't actually transport from behind this curtain to this curtain, right? That there was a mechanism that took her from there to there. Once you know, you can't go see the stage show and be amazed in the same way. And so, if what Patrick is doing here is taking the curtains off the stage show, showing you that the illusion is nothing but trickery, nothing but nothing but distractions and different places to place your attention, while what's really happening in the present moment is really happening in the present moment. And so I think the key thing is, once people break that illusion, they can change their perception of what to come. We are not, Patrick, going to drive what's to come. What's to come is World War III, because it's being driven by the people who are driving it. What's to come is a massive housing crash, because that's the bubble that's been driven. Melody Wright, one of my big favorite people speaking out in the world today, has been a guest with you at least a couple times, and
That's right. I'm
I
so
watched.
glad you know that. She's another
Oh
magnificent
man,
person
when I
out there. Yeah.
look, man, when I saw that you had Melody Wright and Giannis Varoufakis on, I'm like,
Right,
well,
got
this guy
it.
is obviously talking good people here, because these are the good people, and that's the thing. There are some great voices in here, but again, I'm going to argue it's not. We don't have to go out there and face men in the street with guns and create the revolution. I don't think that's the way it has to
That's not
happen.
what I'm suggesting.
But
I'm
what we
trying to
do
use the
have to
last.
do
Yes.
is change our perception of the illusion that's being sold to us, so we no longer buy the illusory aspects. We now see regime change, or foreign bankers wars, or borders and immigrants. We see all of these things for the craven, inhumane tools of an empire that they are. And once we do that, then we can say, okay, the empire is starting World War III with Russia. What does that mean? What am I perceiving? How am I choosing sides between the empires that are choosing war here? How am I choosing sides in a genocide in Gaza? How am I choosing sides? Or am I saying, hold on, because I'm a big anti-war guy, you'll never be able to go back and find me advocating for war. I'm going to be a guy that in every circumstance is against war. And guess what? I've never been wrong. I've been right every fucking time. It's amazing what a constant anti-war stance will give you in terms of being right over your lifetime, because all the wars are wrong. All the people that are doing the dying should not be dying, and they're not grateful to be dying, right? The great Onion headline after 9/11 or after Iraq, dead Iraqi would have loved freedom, right? No, no, the genocide in Iraq did not bring freedom to people. The genocide in Vietnam did not bring freedom to people. We're not doing good things with proxy wars. We are not doing
We
good
don't have
things
freedom at
by
home. We
supporting.
don't have freedom and liberty at home, man. Look,
Right, we don't have it here at home. But again, so if we break that illusion of American exceptionalism, break that illusion of legitimacy of capitalism, break that illusion, once we break those, then people can awaken to their own present moment and step forward. But again, it's going to be a multi-step process. You're going to have to get through the grief, through the cognitive dissonance, through the confusion, all of these things that are intentionally being put on. And that's a lot to ask of people, Patrick. You and I are 55 and 56, respectively. I'm not sure that, I wasn't the same person at 30. I'm guessing you weren't, right? And so
I've been
not
consistent.
everybody has.
I've been consistent the whole time, and I'm going to lay this out on
Not
you.
everybody has 25 years to awaken, though, through the pain of their own life. So
True,
we have to
true.
kind of take some shortcuts here.
No, and I hear you loud and clear, but we don't have the time. The time is waning. Okay,
Yeah.
but
No.
we can bring that up in future dialogue. But I'll finish with this, and I'll thank you again, Namaste, from the
My
bottom
pleasure.
of my heart, dude. This was a really cool conversation. I appreciate your time. I appreciate knowing you're in the world, man, and that we were able to connect in this, and hopefully people can think through their own process during this. But for me, man, look, when you live in light, when you live in truth, you live in light. When you live a lie, you're depraved. When you live in
Right.
truth, you're bulletproof. When you live a lie, inside you die. Stop
Yep.
lying. Stop buying lies. The thing is, it's really about breaking through the asymmetric information. Again, like you said, that for me, it's the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. When you know someone is destroying you based on a methodology that you can stop, you stop it.
Yep.
Just like if you live next door to a pollutant, you stop it. That's regulation. Anyway, there's systems, there's things to go. You wouldn't get on a plane that you knew wasn't going to fly that was designed to fail. There's common sense here as well, right? But nothing's ever going to be perfect, and nobody ever's going to be on flight. But at the same time, pick your poison, and you either rise to be counted in a situation where the world needs people who believe in liberty and justice for all and civil rights, I would argue, above all else.
And
Because
there is nobody to vote for peace. There is nobody to vote for our freedom from the technocratic uh, tyranny that is taking place right now, and that's the challenge that we have.
That's
Is
right.
regardless of who holds the power of the White House today or who holds it on the next inauguration day, we're in the same present moment. We're right now. We're right here, right now. Everything that's going on right here, right now, is what matters. The future is an illusion, right?
I would ask everybody because that's gotten through this, and I hope that you've gotten something. Please reach out to us. Let's keep this dialogue going. Also,
Absolutely.
please check out our new website at www.thecleannewdeal.org. We just launched it last night. Much of my information I put on there is out there, but please spread the word. Hashtag Truth is Marching. I believe we can fix these problems or at least make them better than they are because I think we're at the end of this cycle, whatever this cycle is, man. And I hate to sound like the fourth turning. That's not what I'm inferring. I'm saying that this is just 5 decades of neoliberalism that is manifested. It's not a democracy. It's not capitalism. It's a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that literally uses the full faith and credit of the United States through socialism or communism or Politburo, however you want to interpret that, but to guarantee the mafiocracy. That's our economic system. And now they're fueling fascism in the United States, which has always kind of been there underneath the surface. But I mean, come on, guys, this is absolutely insanity. Dude, I'm going to just say thank you. All the best to you, and I will be in touch. Thank you for your time. Jeff, did you go silent on me? You did. What a bummer. You went silent. All the best to you, Jeff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And folks, please check out Patrick Lovell. No, sorry, www.thecleannewdeal.org. Onwards and upwards.